Hi there, welcome back once again to Fuel for Thought, everything energy related and beyond. Scott Squires here with the insider Dan McTagg. And Dan, I know you're an extremely busy individual these days, so we're going to try and squeeze in as much as we can in as short amount of time as possible. So right off the bat, what's happening with fuel prices in our region and certainly across the country?
Yeah, PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia can, although they have different regulatory jurisdictions, can actually expect about a 1.5 cent decrease for gasoline. It would have been more than that, and I'll explain that later. And about a 3 cent drop for diesel, whether that's the rack price that one province like PEI uses, whether that tends to be just looking at the market prices over the past week. What's made it less than what I thought could be has to do with the fact that we shifted into what's called the summer blend of gasoline. It's called the lower RVP, the low Reid vapor pressure. We go from 13.5 to 7.4. That's the technical RVP. And that saw with it about a 5 cent a liter increase. So an increase of 5 cents when you had an average going in this week of about 2.5 cent drop actually made the drop a little bit less, assuming, of course, that's the way the regulatory bodies try to figure this out. Again, Scott, I work in the world of reality when it comes to gas prices. I don't work in the world of bureaucrats sitting beside the scene trying to synthesize gas prices based on markets. To do that is almost impossible, and there's no person that is that good that they can pretty much develop it. By the way, I know some people in the past have given gas price indications, and it's important to remind ourselves that those who've done this over the past few years in the Atlantic provinces actually got the information from the regulator the night before. That's true of Newfoundland. It's true of New Brunswick. It's also true of Nova Scotia. I have to go by what the market tells me, and the market tells me that there's a slight decrease for gasoline and diesel, but next week we start to see prices moving up.
Important differentiation to make. And Dan, been a roller coaster on world markets with oil prices. What do you see happening short term and maybe even long term?
Well, I think as I've discussed with you before, in my old days working at Gas Buddy, I did a lot of US media, a ton, 30, 40 a day almost. And, from 2016 until pretty much 2018, whenever Donald Trump had something to say or tweeted, markets would basically have heart failure and move accordingly, and sometimes radically. By 2018, 2019, that was no longer the case. They started paying attention to Donald Trump, and I suspect what's happening here, and the markets are starting to even out. Even though OPEC may be increasing a little bit of oil, it's not enough to meet demand. U.S. Production may be hitting its peak in terms of oil. Canadian oil is still very much constrained by a lack of pipelines, thanks to 10 years of government saying no to building out our energy sector, especially when it comes to LNG, but also oil. And so for that reason, we're likely to see oil prices start to reverse course, come back up a little bit, and notwithstanding jitters about a recession or drop in demand as a result of what's happened in the trade tariffs begun by Trump. I don't think it's going to have a real effect as it didn't in the past when it came to previous tariff encounters. I should point out something that I think is rather interesting. The Bank of Canada responded by a slightly lower average price for fuel in Canada with no response in terms of dropping interest rates. The interesting part is that was March 24 compared to March 25. If they compare April 24 to April 25, the decline as a result of removing what should never have been imposed, the carbon tax, temporarily, because the Liberals, should they form government, let's make no bones of it, are going to restore it in terms of an industrial carbon tax. It'll amount to the same thing, but I digress. That 20 to 30 cent decrease year over year, compare those 2 months, means the Bank of Canada will run out of excuses. Maybe they didn't want to make a decision to drop interest rates because it was an election, or maybe it's one of their old buddies, the former bank governor, that they may very well have been giving a nod to. Whatever the reason, the reality is that next month, the Governor Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada is going to look pretty damn stupid when we see inflation drop to 0.5% because gasoline has dropped so precipitously. So I'm going to say this right now. We're going to look really angry at the folks come post-election period. We're dusting these things up and wonder why the Bank of Canada didn't act earlier to drop interest rates by what should be nothing less than another half point, not just stimulate the economy, but to recognize that because of carbon taxes, inflation had been so damn high and had been high for years, even though they didn't want to admit it. The reality is that without carbon taxes, prices have dropped dramatically. So too will inflation. So too should interest rates in this country.
Something to definitely keep an eye on. And something else that a lot of Canadians were keeping an eye on last night, the French language debate between the political leaders. Dan, what, if anything, did Canadians learn new last night about the leaders and their platforms?
I'm a French Canadian. I'm French on my mom's side. I've grown up in French. It's my mother tongue, basically, literally. Mark Carney doesn't speak French. And of course, find it interesting the NDP's only play has been what it's been for the past 5, 6 years. Just attack the Conservatives and attack Polyev. Jagmeet Singh is finished, so is the NDP. That's why they're cozying up to Mark Carney and the Liberals. I think Blanchet had an opportunity to score points. It was on his turf, and he didn't. I think Pierre emerged as certainly the strongest in terms of language and in terms of issues that were discussed. I think it'll set the stage for tonight. If one's an objective person, it's very hard to find someone in this business that is that. I suspect that Pierre Poilievre is going to clean Mark Carney's clock, and though he can say nothing, and his whole point is that he will be attacked. The reality is that he has really nothing to offer, and I think that's going to become fairly clear to those who still are objective about this. To those who, at least he's not Trudeau, and so will vote Liberal again. Well, that's a lost cause, as will the next several years of unaffordability as a result of the simpletons' decision to vote for that party.
And Dan, you and I have talked at length about polls. What are you making of some of the latest numbers that are being seen?
Closer than we thought, but I think the Liberal vote is always more efficient, especially in places where I am in the GTA, where you got that large concentration of people who will vote Liberal. I've said that I've likened them to parasites and mooches and government workers right across the country, and that's the only reason they're voting, because they want to keep their pensions while their own children, everyone else, has to suffer. And I think that's pretty important. That the only age group and category that's supporting the Liberal Party are the boomers, and in particular women boomers. So that aside, we'll see what happens in the election. I think everyone else who gets out and works a hard day and puts in the work and pays their taxes, and will have to pay those taxes completely 3 days after the election, as well as recognize that Mark Carney doesn't pay taxes or hasn't paid taxes in Canada, if I'm to take the reports correctly. I think Canadians have a lot to choose and to recognize. But I've been out knocking on doors. I've made no bones of it. I'm not sitting on the sidelines this time. First time I've done campaigning since 2011, and I'm definitely knocking on doors for Conservatives. And I can tell you what's happening in the street is very different from what we're going to see publicly. As for polls, they talk about what people think, and they have very loaded questions, but they're not going to determine who's coming out. My thing in this is that as much as the weak NDP is a factor for the Liberals, so too is the reality. And I think this is one that confounds those who are backing the Liberals and backing pollsters and media. The Conservative vote is very determined. It's coming out, and it's coming out much stronger than those who are saying they're going to identify as Liberal.
Less than 2 weeks, Dan, until Canadians go to the polls to choose our next federal government. From your perspective, what should Canadians be looking for over the next 9, 10 days before they vote?
We'll look for the decisions to finally happen. This is Easter weekend. People are sitting down and celebrating this Christian holiday. Those who aren't will still be sitting down, have a couple of days off, and decisions will be made. We haven't had pollsters talk much about the undecided. They only talked about the committed or identified. At this point, those who are currently unknown in terms of how they're going to vote and have said they're unavailable for the comments, I think are going to be firming up, and that's why I think the swing will go to the Conservatives, and this may very well be a very tight parliament when it's all said and done. If it's a blowout, that would surprise me, and it will probably anger certain regions of the country, because no one wants another 4 years of what we've seen for the past 10.
Well, Dan, always a pleasure to speak with you. Hope that you enjoy the next few days ahead, celebrating the Easter holiday with your family. Enjoy the turkey and whatever else you do to celebrate. And we'll look forward to having you back with us again next week on Fuel for Thought.
Have a great Easter weekend. Thanks again, Scott, and to all our viewers. We'll see you next week.
Pleasure. Thank you, Dan.